Hi, and welcome to Cove. My name is Jennifer LaPlante. I'm the Executive Director of DeepSense, and I want to welcome you to our final panel discussion in our Mind the Gap series. We're talking about technologies and business optimization. I'm super excited today to have two wonderful guests talk about logistics and operations. But before I get started, thank you for joining us. And this is all about open dialogue and discussion. I have some questions written down, but I would love to hear from you. So if you have any questions, please feel free. Slide them into whatever platform you're watching this on. And if you're not registered, you might have to send an email. And that email will be to info@coveocean.com. And that way we can get a chance to throw some questions up. Feel free to send them through whenever, and we'll do our best to address those. So as we get started, thanks to the team members behind the scenes at Cove who helped organize this, and we really appreciate that they could help arrange it. But I'm going to move on to my two wonderful guests. So first, we're going to start with Moira. She is the project manager at Sedna Technologies. She has a strong consulting background in industrial engineering technology. She's the project manager and is very passionate about working in seafood and aquaculture. She works directly with clients to analyze diverse business operations and provide technology solutions. Sedna specializes in networks of IoT sensors and ERP business applications with the goal of enhancing and improving seafood supply chain. They work across Atlantic Canada, Eastern US, Australia, New Zealand, and Norway. They have a large network of clients ranging from harvesters to buyers to processors and exporters. Aparna is the lead data scientist at this fish. She has a strong background as well in analytics and data with a master's in computer science. Her background also includes being a software engineer, a systems engineer. So with her data science background, she's able to bring all of those worlds together. This fish is a seafood traceability software and artificial intelligence company that reduces costs, strengthens process control, and improves compliance in supply chains. So now that we've got a bit of a background, how about we talk a little about each of you and you do a quick introduction around operations and logistics. Can you tell me a little bit about your role in your company and how it fits within the world of operations and logistics? Moira, do you want to start?
Sure. Yeah. So I'm the project manager at Sedna Technologies, and we do work in kind of all levels of the supply chain. So my role is going and working with clients and helping transfer them from their existing system to one of our solutions. So we do have two pillars at Sedna Technologies. One is a network of IoT sensors. So helping clients monitor water quality, key parameters like ammonia, temperature, and dissolved oxygen. And then the other side of things where I'm more involved is our ERP business applications. So helping modernize the industry and digitize paper trail systems.
Excellent. Which we are going to get into a lot, I'm sure, today. And now, Aparna, what about you? Can you share a little?
Of course. So this fish is focused on helping our customers, primarily seafood processors, improve profitability and sustainability. And we do that primarily through digitization. Like all of us know, a lot of the data is still sitting on paper. People are still trying to go digital. So we help them with digitization across all stages of their seafood processing. And we have a suite of AI products that help them improve their efficiency on operations, quality control, all of that. So yeah, we are a digitalization platform for seafood processors.
Amazing. Now, I think there's one thing that's pretty key that I realized we didn't talk about before is you both work in the aquaculture space for the most part, right? And I think a lot of the things that we talk about are extremely transferable. So regardless of what other type of operations companies would have, I think there's very much consistencies in the things that you would see in your clients' operations that are transferable across others. So in case during this conversation I forget, I'm going to try to jump back to some of those and see how we can find some tangible examples as well for others that are working in the ocean sector, but maybe not specifically aquaculture. But let's start with operations and logistics. You know, when you have a conversation with someone and start talking about it, or if you were talking to my 10-year-old, how would you explain operations and logistics and what it means to be better or do better at your operations and logistics? Who wants to take that one?
I could take that. The way I would describe operations is basically everything you do to get any product out, right? It's everything. It involves even unloading your raw material from the vessel. That is an operation. Deciding what goes into storage and what comes out, that is operation. And then there are obvious operations where you clean the fish, you cook the fish, if we are talking about fish and other seafood too, right? So operations is basically everything. And logistics is pretty much about managing those operations, right? Making sure these operations flow through the pipeline, so you know what comes next. You know what came before, you know what comes next, and you know what you're supposed to do right now. Being able to see that and control that's logistics, right? So that's how, I don't know if that makes sense to a 10-year-old. I would probably make it simpler for a 10-year-old, maybe give an example or something. But yeah, I think most of our audience is going to understand what I'm saying.
Oh, I think you would get that.
Yeah.
Moira, would you have any other parts to add?
No, absolutely. Yeah, that's it. And the logistics, I sort of think of more transportation. So getting that product or that service to the end customer and doing it efficiently. And the other thing, the big thing with operations is just that continuous improvement. So operations is looking at the way you're doing something and providing that product, and then looking at ways to kind of what worked 20 years ago maybe doesn't work now. So that's a big part of operations that we both kind of work in.
Absolutely. So I think that's really a great point. So when we think about the parts that are really important, can we talk a little about why companies would want to explore making these improvements? So you talk about that continuous learning, but what are some of the goals that some of the people you work with have? So when you sit down and have those first conversations, there's probably a broad range of reasons why people want to engage with you. What are some of those objectives, Moira?
Right. Well, one always is the government is changing their standards and their certifications. So that's empowering clients to kind of look forward at meeting those new standards that they can't meet right now with their current operations. And the other big thing is, standards maybe don't even exist yet in the industry. So through technology and the adoption of technology, we're kind of creating new standards in the industry at the same time as well.
That's a great one. Right. And Aparna, what about you when you have some conversations with some new customers or clients or discussions and brainstorms? What are some of the things that come up?
One of if I were to talk about concerns that customers might have, it's the cost of transferring to another mode of collecting data, right? And our biggest, I'd say, pitching point to that is just throwing raw data at them, which is basically, it's very common to see across our customers that they log about 1 million data points in a year. That's about 2 GB of data, right? Like that's 1 million data points. And by keeping all of these data points on paper or Excel sheets, like that's the best kind of decision they probably have. And imagine managing 1 million data points across departments, QC, production, vessel, all of that on Excel sheets or worse paper, right? Any fear they might have about training their on-floor workers in transferring to a new medium, this single point should offset that fear. Because yes, there's absolutely going to be a training cost, but at the end of the day, not a lot changes for the workers. They were entering data on paper, now they might enter data on tablets, right? But the outcome of doing that is so much more. The amount of visibility, the amount of analytics you can run on that. Once you have the data, you know what to optimize on. So yeah, that is typically how the conversation goes. There's always going to be some amount of fear about training, new way of working, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree. When they're not used to, some of these companies aren't used to having the data, to them, it's just about doing the simple operation of, testing the water or writing down a quality report, but they're not used to looking at trends over time, getting it in real time. So what these systems do is help them actually pinpoint and know what to prioritize, where before they don't even have that information to even look at. And the other thing, kind of going back, that in the seafood industry, labor shortage is a massive issue. There's an aging population, and it's kind of predicted to get worse. So I really want to note that technology, it's about finding the right fit, there's lots of technology out there. So it's about finding what works for that organization, moving forward with the technology.
So it's really interesting because you've touched on so many different aspects of what you can understand from the operations and logistics side of things. So there's human resources, because it's understanding your staffing levels. You talked about quality and quality assurance. What are some of the other areas that you find companies talk about? So when they're trying to figure out what their priorities are, how do you help them figure out what is the lowest hanging fruit? What are those things they should start doing, or should they do it all at once? Moira, what do you find with companies you work with?
We find generally doing it all at once isn't the best approach. And really, our take is that voice of customer. We don't know what's going to be the most beneficial thing for your company. I've learned everyone does things differently, even if there are standards in the industry. So it's about having that conversation with our clients. What do they actually need? And it's up to them to kind of direct us to what what's painful, what are the pain points, and what do they want to alleviate first. So Sedna is set up very modular so that we can help clients kind of tackle things a bit at a time. And kind of the other key word we're hearing all the time is traceability. So proving for, again, government or their customers overseas, where, when, what, who, if you look at what products were caught. So traceability is a big kind of buzzword where clients are starting to come to us, whereas, 4 years ago, might not have heard it as much. Now it seems to be very apparent. And Aparna, you're shaking your head.
Yeah, because that's at the mention of traceability. That's all over the place. That's the primary concern: quality control and traceability. If something goes wrong, they have to know where it went wrong, exactly where it went wrong. So.
And to prove it.
Yeah, and to prove it. Yeah. I was thinking of something that I wanted to say, but now that kind of passed my mind. So
I'll ask you a different question, then you'll probably come back to it. So one of the things that, when you're, obviously there's massive scale here, because you've both touched on the fact that there's paper-based, there's movement to digitization. So all of that is a lot of change. But how do you help a company figure out what the cost benefit analysis of this? What is that ROI on them trying to adopt new processes? How would you guide them through this?
I'll take that. Okay. So that's a really good question, and that is something that we've had to try and figure out how to do well, right? So we've been if you go to the Fisheries website or subscribe to our newsletter, you'll see that we've been writing a lot of articles on ROI calculation of digitization, right? We've actually added links on our website to external ROI calculators, and there are plenty of ROI calculators out there, but it can never be one size fits all. Right. So the only way for you to really understand your ROI is to be educated about all parts that you would be digitizing and what you think might come out of it. So we have like an introductory article out on what parts we'll be talking about. So your ROI starts from just digitization, like, for example, just collecting what happens on a production floor. Simply gives you a visualization into what's happening at what time and what would I expect at a particular time of the day, right? And performances, and it's just simple data collection itself gives you so much that you can work with. Mm-hmm. But on top of that, now once you start collecting a lot more data, you could build significant amount of AI, like predicting yields, predicting drain weights, predicting salinity of the fish based on the storage conditions and the waters it was caught in. There's so much that we can build, and there are very simple AI that we can build where we catch errors very quickly. Like there could be data entry errors, but we can catch that very quickly based on just something as simple as, hey, this doesn't match, whatever you've entered doesn't match your historical pattern. That's a very easy AI to build, right? But for all of that, you need data. And even if you don't build any of that AI, just knowing what happens on your production floor is a great place to start, right? So I would recommend everybody who's listening to this to go and check out our series on ROI calculations, subscribe to a newsletter so you know when we put out new articles about it. But yeah.
So it's a good point, because I think, yeah, it's a tough call, because you can't say to one organization, you're going to see this kind of return, because if you currently are using everything paper-based and you have to go to automating those first initial processes, it's such a big investment relative to someone who already has systems, and maybe it's re-engineering how your data flows together. Okay. Is there anything then that you think of, what are some good starting points? So for companies who first maybe don't have some of those processes or data fully mapped out, how do you recommend, Moira, maybe thinking of the ERP systems and some other elements? Are there things that companies can do to start getting ready? So if there is some focus, maybe next year their goal is to start rolling out some new operational processes, and they need to start collecting some data to make them a little more efficient. What are those recommendations you might have that they might want to start doing to collect information, or some target points they could start collecting data about?
Right. Well, yeah, I'd certainly look at kind of what are the goals they're trying to achieve. For me, what I see, we're always working with season starts. So, you have the spring season, for example, up in Cape Breton. So if you are an organization who's looking at maybe digitizing these things, think about those deadlines. What you don't want to do is introduce technology very, very quickly. Those season opens are there's a lot going on. So we like to try and bring things in earlier so people have time to really get used to the system as they're moving forward.
That's, great suggestion. And I think you don't want to miss out on collecting data for multiple seasons too. So do you have any recommendations as people are looking at those efficiencies or changes? How can they track and trace those improvements that they might be seeing? Or do you have recommendations of when they should really evaluate, are we doing things better?
Right. Well, the big thing we're doing is alleviating loss. So the people who come to us, either, say they're holding a tank full of live lobster and they are just doing tests of that water every 8 hours and recording it on paper. When they leverage our sensor, they get data all the time, and they get notifications if things trend up or down. So now all of a sudden they're not showing up on a Monday and there's no water in the tank and they've lost 90,000 pounds of lobster. They're seeing those things earlier. So the people that come to us, we're helping them lower those amounts of waste, mortality, and loss. And the other big thing is, again, like there is labor shortage issues and people having trouble holding on to people. So what we do is, one client, we save them 2 full days of manual data entry a week. So that person's not losing their job. They're now able to look at the data and do other things within the organization. So our clients don't have to hire a specialized accountant or something like this. We can kind of empower that existing person to now work in all those roles.
That's an amazing stat. So when we talked earlier about ROIs and real return on that investment, that's incredible.
Yeah. When Moira mentioned, the catching any loss in production upfront, right? That is one of the biggest items on our ROI calculators, right? Like being able to predict bottlenecks and breakdowns. So we typically, the way we introduce our software to our customers is they begin by digitizing parts of their production floor. We recommend doing all of it, but if they want to just the way Moira explained, right? Like our software absolutely has to be configurable according to the customer's needs. And we recommend digitizing the whole production flow, but if not, maybe parts of the production floor, and then we extend it to vessel and QC and all parts of processing, seafood processing, which means that they are able to link every single lot of fish from the vessel all the way to QC. They know what is going through where, and which means if they expect, or we can actually predict upfront based on historical patterns if there's something that might be going wrong, because we are also going to start including information about the machines, the performance of the machine, integrate their data with our software so we can start predicting that as well. So yeah, predicting big breakdowns is a huge part of what we do.
Yeah. Sorry, on that, just a note, where we work a little bit less in processing, we kind of only touch on that, but like you mentioned, the value in seeing something like the moment it happens and using that to change your operation. So we look at just digitizing, dockside. So we have buyers of live lobster. And right now, the current process in the industry is to write what you purchase on like a 3-tiered receipt. One to the fisherman, one makes its way to the office, and one, I believe, to DFO. So what we do is just simply digitize that. But if you compare two organizations, two buyers competing, let's say exporting to China, one person's waiting until the end of the day to get that paper entered into the system. They're communicating through text and phone calls to figure out how much they actually got, because every fisherman brings in a different amount. You can't really predict that number. So, and then you compare it to someone else who gets that information the moment it comes in at 9 a.m. They're going to be able to sell that product quicker than the other one. So it allows them to remain have a competitive advantage.
Yeah, that's a great explanation of
Now, one of the things, there's a couple paths we're going to go down, but one of the ones is around the legacies and behaviors. So, aquaculture sometimes tends to have a lot of history, which is fantastic. But what it also means is people have had a way they've always done things. So, Moira, can you talk a little about some of the recommendations or things you've observed of that whole change management piece? What are some of those ways to really get people to start thinking, adopting, being open to trying new things and seeing benefits?
Right. Change management is massive. Especially, we're very hands-on in the training and the switchover. So for someone in my position, it's understanding that there's early adopters and laggards, that kind of curve is always going through my mind, that you have to approach everyone in your organization is going to adopt the technology at a different level. So a bit of patience there with each person. But like I mentioned earlier, there's tons of technology out there. So just, it's about choosing what works for you. When you look at the seafood industry, we knew who we would be working with. So we knew we had to make an easy to use interface. So a mobile app that's not overly complicated, just, something that the bare minimum, they're not typing anything out. It's all in drop down lists. So not trying to give, the top level of technology to people who don't even, that's not what they need at that step in the process. So yeah, I think, again, the industry is modernizing it. So the way you did things might work, but it can be, challenging to switch those people to think, well, you're seeing the money coming in, but you're not seeing the money going out the back.
Right.
So kind of shifting people's focus. But I think sometimes people surprise you too. You might think that they're not going to be open, and they are. So I've kind of learned that as well.
We have, so when we build features or improve our product, we all create a user persona that we're doing this for, right? And our user persona very much matches what Moira is saying as well. So we assume, so most of the seafood processors that we work with, not all, but most, they happen to be family-run businesses. They've been doing this for a long time. They know how this should work, right? They might not never have digitized it and looked at it as a third person, but this runs in their family. And this could mostly be someone who's middle-aged, who's taken this over from their parents, who's running the company. And they know, they've been hearing about digitization a lot, but they don't exactly know why this should work for them, because things have been working just fine all this time, right? But they're open to being convinced otherwise, right? So that is our typical persona. And like Mara said, like that is exactly why we have to keep our software extremely configurable, which means when a worker is entering something into the software, the only difference is that instead of writing something, you're now touching on a tablet. Mm-hmm. But the flow of it, the information, the way you read it, all of that is completely matching what you were used to, so that your brain is not trying to reframe everything you were doing before, right? So yeah, we have to, that persona is very important when you build anything in this industry.
Definitely seen that, and it seems to be, and I'm sure it's in all industries, but especially seafood, that it is family run and it's been passed down and down and down for so long. So we certainly come across that. And I think you touched on a good point. Yeah, they know how their operation works. So yeah, it's about being able to tweak and listen to them and let them kind of lead and say, oh no, this is how we do things. Can we accommodate that? Can we automate this? But yeah, it is just, whatever it still comes down to, what they were entering on paper. It's still that sort of similar process, but just digital. And I think in the past where I've learned to improve on is you have to give those workers who are the ones, it's often the office managers who decide they want technology. So you have to let the people who will be on the shop using it, give them fair warning, include them in the change management, because we've seen that kind of get pushed on them, and that can be a bit troublesome sometimes.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
So when you are rolling out some kind of system, I mean, for the most part, a lot of these are adopting technology and digitization. It's regardless of whether it's your existing operations or improving your logistics overall, there's now adding new data points and using those data points. So what's the recommendation when you're implementing these new systems? Do organizations run things in parallel? So if my old school way was I wrote things in a binder and I had a piece of paper, but now a system automates it, do they continue to keep some historical records in other ways? Or do you flip a switch on one day? Suddenly day one, you're now in this new system and off you go. What's that hybrid model? And what does the world look like when somebody implements something new?
Yeah, I could take that. Go ahead, Mara. Sorry.
No, you start. I'll jump in.
All right. So I was going to say, when we implement a system like that, we henceforth, whatever you logged, it has to be a switch flip. We can't partially log something on paper and partially log something digital, because that is unnecessary. You are reducing your ROI by doing that, absolutely. But we also respect the fact that you have a whole mound of information sitting on paper, and there has to be a way of carrying over that information trail sitting in paper into the software, because that's when you get your maximum ROI, right? So we are building solutions where we can, we have solutions. We already have a solution where you can attach your documents into the software, so you can look through documents. But we also are planning to build AI solutions where we parse this information automatically into the software. But that is the way to go, right? We will eventually have all the history logged and digitized, but we don't expect someone to manually go back, pull out old information and log that. But from here on, it has to be a switch flip, because otherwise you're absolutely reducing your ROI and complicating the whole process.
Right. Yeah. And that would be kind of similar on our side of things. Is we pick that day, and it's usually like the season start, let's say, where they switch over. what we do for training purposes is with our system, we create a demo and a production, and they look identical, but we can go in and train them on this demo system. They can get used to it, make all the mistakes, and it's not going to affect that organization's actual, data. And then on that day that we choose, we officially switch them over. So if we look at just digitizing like those dockside operations, purchases and bait sales, maybe the first few days they will keep they might like to keep it on paper because they don't know yet or things like that, and then we can kind of compare them, and then eventually, and that's sort of up to them. I agree with Aparna, like we want to get you away from having to do two things, but if that person needs to, for their mind, to keep something on paper for a little while, that they absolutely can do that. As far as systems, it depends on what people take on and what module they take on, but sometimes our system will run in parallel to their accounting system or something like that. So just rather than having to go to paper to see those numbers for their accounting, it's now all digitized. And that's where we specialize the reports to show exactly how they need it to run in parallel. And what we found, and I'm sure Aparna, you've seen, is Excel is just the most commonly used thing that people like. So we've made our whole RIP, all ERP, all of the reports download into Excel with one click. So
Yes.
that's it helped our success with people because they know they can get it into Excel and from there work with it to whatever system they might still be using.
Yeah. Being able to download the data into Excel is a big ask. So we absolutely, every part of the data that gets logged can be downloaded into Excel, and we also give them extra analytics and reports that they can download, right? And I completely understand that, sort of slowing down, like giving them a little bit of time to like transfer over to a new method of working, and that might not be completely doable on a production floor,
right?
Because on a production floor, the whole, so if you say, for example, the cooking station says, hey, we need some more time to digitize ourselves, and the QC is ready to go digital. QC doesn't know where this data is coming from, right? So it would be amazing for us to give us our customers that, so we can then maybe pick and choose based on the problem they're trying to solve, right? So if they are trying to solve a specific part of the problem, then we can sort of streamline and digitize just the whole link that connects to the solution of that problem. But that whole link has to be digitized. So yeah, it's not a luxury we can have on a production floor.
Yeah, understandable. Yeah.
Now, in terms of, when an organization is going to digitize, I think this is going to be a tricky question to answer. So maybe it's silly that I'm asking, but what should people expect in terms of the amount of effort and work that goes into trying to make their organization more digital? Like, is there a way to wrap their heads around who needs to be involved and what kind of knowledge base do those people need to have, and what kind of time commitment was required for them to try to figure out how to implement a digital system? Moira, we'll start with you.
Sure. Yeah. And, it depends, but I'm a big believer in the more people that you can kind of include in a change from the moment that they're going to be involved, the better. It's a bit tricky, I guess. It depends, but I think what is important to do if you're at the head of that organization, it's explaining the value of the system and really telling your workers, this is the end goal, this is why we're taking it on, this is the need for change, this is why we're making the changes because it's not working this way, and kind of mapping that all out. I've certainly seen shop floor workers who don't understand where that data goes maybe, so they're the ones entering it and that's fine, but they don't understand just how much time it's saving the office and how much smoother their operations are. So really explaining, start to finish, we all work together and these are our goals and this is why we've had to change.
Yeah. That covers it well. I really don't have much to add except, it has to be a conversation across all levels of the organization. It cannot be top down, because I can say that we don't have, we seem to be able to convey that across to our customers well, that they've been able to get their workers on board. So we see good quality data coming. We know from the data quality that the workers are respecting the need for this. But this is not related to this fish at all, but this comes from my experience running my own startup. So I was building a software that was a AI solution for last mile logistics, right? And we had this huge problem where we would pitch our solution to the execs, and the execs would see the benefit in that, and they would say, "Hey, yeah, run a small POC for us, and let's see what happens." And the workers and the end users were actually delivery people, and they were running against the clock, and they hated having to use an extra software. They didn't understand why.
Right.
Yeah, so that affects adoption significantly. If your workers don't understand why you're doing what you're doing, it affects adoption significantly. So this is not the case with this fish, but I've had that experience before.
Yeah, and it's like we can go in and do our absolute best and help them shift over. But if they don't have that drive in the organization, that manager, that owner, enforcing this, then it becomes more difficult. So just, if they think that person's wavering, or, oh, it's not going to work, we're not going to have to do it, then it gets tricky. So we're there to help, but also, the organization, I guess, you have to adapt. We can give you and adjust our system as best we can to meet your organization, but you're going to have to give a little bit on your side as well and meet us.
Yeah, and if we don't have everybody on board, that will significantly affect the quality of the data. It is very important for the workers to understand why the data quality is important, because then everything fails. Your whatever information you get, your overall information about your production floor efficiencies, the AI is going to make no sense, because if the data is not sensible, AI is not going to be sensible, right? And once we lose that information because of bad adoption, it's not information we can very easily get back. So upfront, we make sure we watch our data. When every time we onboard a customer, we keep a tab on the quality of data that comes in. Absolutely, as a data science team, make sure the analytics make sense. So the data is and we've until now not had. There could be honest errors, but not data quality issues in terms of not caring about what they're entering.
Yeah. Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Now, if I were running my own organization and I had some staff and I was engaged with either of you and thought, okay, I'm going to implement the system and I'm going to be twice as profitable now because I'm collecting data and it's going to be better. What would you say to me if I came in with that naive perception and started talking to you?
That is that would be ideal, but that's why we have this whole conversation about ROI, right? We put a lot of thought into having a conversation about ROI, and we are trying to educate our customers and our potential customers about how to think about their ROI. It's hard. It's really hard. Although there are so many ROI calculators out there, the customers are not convinced it works for them, because yes, it cannot be a one size fits all, right? So we are absolutely going to have to sit with a customer and see what they're doing, because if they're actually doing everything on paper, then yes, digitizing the system is going to lead to a significantly higher ROI. But in case they don't have a lot of processes, but they were still logging data into Excel or maybe sometimes MS Access, which is like kind of a database, they have some kind of a database access, then your ROI comes from us being able to build intelligence over your existing data. And that is to be seen, and that intelligence will depend on the quality of data you have, right? So we have AI products that we propose to our customers, but the outcome of that AI will depend on the quality of data that you already have. So yeah, the ROI is such a varying spectrum, right? Like from paper to digital, huge ROI. From digital to business intelligence, depends on what data you already have, right? So yeah, once you get there, that depends is like it's confusing. Yeah, so we have to sit down with every customer and calculate that per customer.
Yeah, it's tricky, and we're less in the processing. I think that industry is even more standardized, and they keep track of things like production efficiency and weight yields and things. So a lot of things we do are kind of way back, just step one, basic. So really what we see is more the time it saves, decreasing wasteful practices and processes or loss of, product. So, and, once we give this system to our clients, it's their information and their data. So we can give them the reports and the analytics they need, but that's where it's tricky, where I can't give a set number on ROI because it's simply not my information to go in and do those analytics on. We have case studies where clients are open to that, but it's a very tricky thing. But I would like our to strive to better be able to put a value to something like that.
Yeah, but it's a good point because I think because someone could go and look at that data, but then never make better decisions. So it's all up to them too sometimes to use that data and that input and the guidance that those systems have provided. And I think that that's one tricky thing sometimes is just because now you have the data, it's not always, it's still on you to use that data appropriately too.
Exactly, yeah. And some of them, that's where reports and things, we can give them those types of things really easily. But how much do you want to look back over the last 2 years, 3 years and get into it? It's all there for you to kind of leverage and go and look at. The other thing sort of with the data that sort of helped people, it's not direct ROI, I guess, but now that we've been able to help people get certifications that they weren't able to get with their existing system. So it's another way that you can kind of look at, okay, well now when I'm selling this to China, I can stamp, boom, it's this quality product, which you can kind of look at that as now you're going to get maybe more money for your product because you can prove how you kept it and where it came from.
Very cool.
Yeah.
So,
before we switch context, I'm going to absolutely do a shameless plug-in. Please subscribe to our newsletter on ROI because we have been putting a lot of thought into this. So it's a huge question for you. Yeah.
Moira, do you have a shameless plug too for Sedna?
I don't think I really do. You can follow us on all our things. We have lots of articles that we post about our clients and stuff. But yeah.
Excellent. Now, in terms of, the whole concept of digitization and data, sometimes some people get afraid of doing things and they'll say, I'll just hire a student and I'll just get them to build something for me. Can we talk a little about that, about what might be some of the risks and why that might not be a good idea and why trying to get a more streamlined approach might be beneficial? Aparna?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Sure. So is this question about the seafood processors or the customers? Anybody? Okay.
It's really anyone, because I think, when we have these conversations, we're collecting more data, helping you think about systems and processes, documenting them out, and going and build them can help you, in theory, be more efficient and effective.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes people get afraid and think that maybe I'll just have someone come in and do it for me really quickly.
I see what you're asking. So you might be able to digitize some of your data by doing that, but the biggest advantage to working with a streamlined software stack like Sedna or like this fish, right? The biggest advantage is that we work with many such customers who have similar data. And there's significant power in aggregation of such data like this. So one thing is we understand and empathize with this domain a lot more. After having worked with so many customers, we anticipate what troubles you might have going digital, and we try to adjust for that upfront. And the bigger thing is, yes, you might have gone from paper to a database by hiring a student to log everything onto a database. But then what? Like now you would want to make use of all this information you have, right? Like if you it's treasure, like it's digital age and information is treasure, right? So if you aren't making use of it, you're losing out on a lot of money by not making use of it. And but then we all know that to build uh, AI solutions, you need to have data from a variety of sources. So your AI is intelligent enough. You might have a certain set of information, but you might not also have certain parts that other customers might have captured. Like, and this is not customer centric, but the AI gets more and more intelligent as it collects more aggregated data, variety of data. It's helpful to everybody, right? It helps everyone else to have AI that has visibility into a lot of different data sources. So I'm not going to say it is unintelligent to have someone just come in and digitize it for you. It's a start. Like if that's what you can afford, please do that. Digitize it anyhow. But if you can, if you are getting familiar with digitization, absolutely look into software providers who know how this is done. So
yeah, I completely agree with all of those things. Definitely, when we first put out our first system, it operated a certain way, and then the next year we learned, oh, okay, will be really helpful. Oh, okay, this. So where we're at now is from our customers' feedback, and we've been able to improve and get better and get better. I think people underestimate software development. It's sort of a new thing, and I've heard people say, well, I'll just get someone to develop this. That's a huge task. So look at something that's already developed and that can tweak to you, like creating some software from the ground up. It's doable, but I think it's new and people don't always I don't even fully understand. Aparna, you seem to have that background, but there's a lot to it. And to touch on the student things, I've definitely seen the student situation go wrong. Maybe not a student coming in to develop something, but people saying, oh, I'll just bring in a student and they'll do it. I had a client who brought in students to help take on the system, but they didn't explain what their role was. So the workers thought they were like spying on them the whole time, and they didn't help. So again, the change management, communicating why they're there to help is huge. But I've also seen, we've hired students out of Dalhousie and other co-ops. So they can be a great addition to kind of help take a system on. We have a system going on in May, and they said, oh, we're going to bring a student in just as extra help. Great idea. Those work out really well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, within the company, yes, absolutely. We hire, make use of a lot of amazing co-op programs that we have. We work with universities, and they can be a great addition to your team, right? But they are also working. They're also taking from the expertise that we've built within the company. They are now able to understand and empathize with the customer in a completely different way. This is not just software. This is not just code. This is not just data. This is that there is an outcome to all of this. There are livelihoods that are getting impacted by what you build. They might be great at coding, but this is not something that can be taught in college or university, right? So
right.
Yeah. So within the company, I completely agree. Like we do hire students all the time. Yeah.
It's great. And I always worry about, when something's built, who maintains it. So I think that's the big thing is systems like this, you need someone who's maintaining it. So I have one last question, and this might be a tricky one to answer, but, the organizations you work with probably haven't always had a technology line item in their budget. Or investment in technology hasn't always been something that's been their priority. Maybe if you're processing, you've had some your processing plant maybe didn't have a lot of computer systems in it, or if it was minimal. And then Moira, even with some of the fishers you'd work with and other harvesters, the data that they would have had access to is a little bit different. So have you heard anything, or what's the dialogue you've heard about people's perceptions and minds opening up to realize that they need to spend a little bit more on technology, and technology adoption needs to, is really important to sustain and grow the industry?
I can touch on that. So the big one in the seafood sector is, again, the government kind of forcing some changes. So luckily, there's a funding program available called the Atlantic Fisheries Fund, which a lot of our clients have leveraged. So it's made that adoption a lot easier for people. And I think it's opened the minds to people who wouldn't have done it if they had to pay out of their pocket. So that's been kind of a big one. And it seems in aquaculture and seafood and lobster that there's a lot of funding out there all across Canada, especially here in Atlantic Canada. So that's a great option to help take on technology if your organization doesn't have that money just sort of sitting around, which they wouldn't, right? So, and that's what it's worth looking into.
Yeah, I agree. Like the government's requiring a certain amount of information is a great motivator for them to switch digital, because they might not be an early adopter, but they see other early adopters being able to get their certifications and things like that much faster, and that's a huge motivator. So yeah.
Do you find that it's a bit of a copycat thing? Like if someone sees, once you get in one area, then other people want it? Because that's what we sort of found.
Yeah, we definitely see that adoption is very geographical. So if we end up getting an early adopter in a certain geographical region, everyone else wants to be in on it too, because they see that a lot of things become much faster for one person. So they see proof of why they should be doing that. So yeah, that's the standard early adopter dynamic, right? Like someone uses it, everybody sees it works, and then everyone follows along. And certainly geographical, yes.
Yeah.
Amazing. Well, I don't really have any more questions for you. I think this has been super helpful. I mean, one of my favorite topics in the world is data, and this hugely touches on data. That it sounds like change management and people are absolutely critical to understand and improve operations and logistics, and getting people to be inputting and engaging and supporting that data. And I'm super excited because that is just something I can get behind and cheer. But are there any other thoughts that you want to share that we didn't cover off?
Nothing I can really think of right now. I think this was a really good discussion.
Yeah, same on my end.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, both of you. I really appreciate you joining us, and thanks to everyone who watched. We had a great team at Cove who organized and arranged everything, so thank you. And this series will be available online, so please go check it out. There were 6 talks. This is the final one. So thanks very much, Aparna and Moira. It was great chatting with you today.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jen. Nice to meet you, Moira.